The blood on Marcus Kane's knuckles was still fresh when the merchant caravan arrived at his farmstead, their polished wagons gleaming like copper coins in the late afternoon sun. He had been splitting wood behind his cabin, working through the frustration of another failed harvest, when the sound of hooves and wheels crunching over the dirt path pulled his attention from the chopping block. Marcus wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, leaving a smudge of dirt across his temple, and watched as 3 ornate wagons rolled to a stop near his front porch. Men in fine clothing emerged, their boots too clean for honest work, their eyes scanning his modest property with the calculating gaze of those who measured everything by its price. The leader, a portly man with silver threading through his beard and rings on every finger, approached with a smile that did not reach his eyes. Behind him, 2 guards flanked a 4th figure, smaller and hunched, wrapped in chains that clinked with each shuffling step. Marcus set down his axe and walked forward, his weathered hands hanging loose at his sides, ready but not threatening. "Good evening, friend," the merchant called out, his voice smooth as oil on water. "My name is Cornelius Vander, and I represent the Eastern Trade Consortium. We have traveled far, and I wonder if we might trouble you for water and perhaps a place to rest our horses for the night." Marcus glanced past the merchant to the wagons, noting the quality of the goods visible through partially open canvas flaps. Silk, spices, things that had no business on a failing farm at the edge of the frontier. His gaze settled on the chained figure, and his jaw tightened. Even from this distance, he could see the green tint to the skin beneath the grime and the distinctive shape of tusks protruding from a grimacing mouth. "Water is free to any who ask," Marcus said, his voice rough from disuse. He lived alone out here, and some days he went without speaking to another soul. "As for the rest, I will hear what you want in return before I agree." Cornelius chuckled, a sound like coins rattling in a purse. "A cautious man, I respect that. Truly we ask for little. A patch of ground for our tents, access to your well, and perhaps we might trade for some of your provisions. We can pay handsomely." Marcus nodded slowly, but his eyes remained on the chained figure. "And the prisoner?" The merchant's smile faltered for just a moment before reasserting itself. "Ah, you have a sharp eye. That is merchandise, not a prisoner. An orc girl we acquired in the Northern Territories. She will fetch a fine price in the capital as a curiosity or perhaps as labor in the deep mines. But she is secured, I assure you. No danger to you or your property." The figure shifted, and Marcus caught a glimpse of her face beneath the tangled dark hair. Young, probably no more than 20 summers, with sharp green eyes that held a defiant spark, despite the obvious exhaustion etched into every line of her body. Bruises mottled her arms where the shackles had rubbed the skin raw, and dried blood crusted one corner of her mouth. Something cold settled in Marcus's chest, a familiar weight he had hoped to leave behind when he abandoned his sword and came to this isolated plot of land. He had seen captives before, during his years in the border wars, had seen what men did to those they considered less than human. He had participated in it, to his eternal shame, following orders and telling himself it was necessary. "She looks half dead," Marcus observed, keeping his tone neutral. "Spirited creature," Cornelius said with a dismissive wave. "Refuses to eat properly, fights at every opportunity, but she will break eventually. They all do." Marcus met the orc girl's eyes across the distance, and for a heartbeat, something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, or simply the acknowledgement of one weary soul seeing another. Then she looked away, her shoulders hunching further as if trying to disappear into herself. "You can make camp in the east field," Marcus said finally. "Water from the well, as I said. I have no provisions to spare, Harvest was poor. Most generous indeed, Cornelius said, bowing slightly. We shall be gone by first light and leave you in peace. Marcus watched as the caravan moved to set up their camp, the guards roughly hauling the orc girl from the wagon, and chaining her to a thick post they hammered into the ground. She collapsed into a heap, her green skin stark against the brown earth, and did not move even when one of the guards kicked dust in her direction. Marcus turned away and walked back to his cabin, but the image of her face, that moment of connection, followed him inside and would not let him rest. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and violet. Marcus sat on his porch, a tin cup of weak tea cooling in his hands, and listened to the sounds of the camp. Laughter, the smell of cooking meat, the casual conversation of men who thought themselves civilized even as they trafficked in flesh. He could see the orc girl from where he sat, still chained to that post, ignored and forgotten now that the camp was settled. He tried to tell himself it was not his concern. He had left that life behind, hung up his sword, and come here to farm and to forget. He owed nothing to a stranger, especially not an orc. The wars had taught him that orcs were dangerous, unpredictable enemies of humanity. But those same wars had also taught him that men could be monsters too, and that sometimes the worst cruelty came from those who believed themselves righteous. The moon rose, full and bright, casting silver shadows across the farmstead. Marcus set down his cup and stood, his decision made before he fully acknowledged it to himself. He walked to his cabin, retrieved a waterskin and a chunk of bread wrapped in cloth, and made his way across the yard toward the merchant camp. The guards were drinking around the fire, their attention turned inward to their own entertainment. Marcus approached the orc girl from an angle that kept him out of direct sight, moving with the practiced silence of a man who had once scouted enemy lines. She did not stir as he drew near, and for a moment he feared she might have already succumbed to her injuries and deprivation. But then her ear twitched, a slight movement that told him she was aware of his presence even if she chose not to acknowledge it. "I brought water," Marcus said quietly, kneeling a few feet away from her, "and food if you will take it." She turned her head slowly, those sharp green eyes fixing on him with suspicion and something deeper, something that might have been resignation. Up close, he could see more details. Her tusks were small and elegantly curved, and her features, while different from human proportions, held a striking quality. Scars marked her arms and shoulders, the kind earned from combat or hard labor, and her hands, though bound, showed the calluses of someone accustomed to weapons or tools. "Why?" Her voice was rough, barely above a whisper, but it carried weight. She spoke the common tongue with a thick accent but clearly. "Because you need it," Marcus said simply. He uncorked the waterskin and held it out. "And because no one else will." She stared at the offering for a long moment, her jaw working as if she were grinding down words she wanted to spit at him. Finally, she leaned forward, her chains rattling, and took the waterskin with both hands. She drank deeply, water spilling down her chin and neck, and Marcus could see the way her throat worked with each desperate swallow. When she finally lowered the skin, gasping, some of the hardness in her expression had softened. "Thank you," she said, and those two words sounded like they cost her something. Marcus unwrapped the bread and broke off a piece, holding it where she could reach. She took it carefully, her fingers brushing against his for just a second, and he felt the tremor in her hands. She ate slowly, as if savoring each bite, or perhaps as if her stomach had been empty so long that too much too fast would make her sick. "What is your name?" Marcus asked. She swallowed, considering him with those eyes that seemed to see straight through to the core of things. "Gracia." "I am Gracia of the Stone Mountain clan." Marcus Kane, he replied. This is my land. A human who shows kindness to an orc, Gracia said, a bitter edge to her tone. You must be simple or foolish. Maybe both, Marcus admitted. He settled back on his heels, glancing toward the camp to ensure they remained unobserved. How did they capture you? Gracia's expression hardened, her tusks catching the moonlight. My clan traded with a border village. We have a truce, fragile but holding. I went to deliver furs and herbs. These men were waiting. They had crossbows, nets. They killed my brother when he tried to defend me. Her voice did not waver, but Marcus heard the grief beneath the words, cold and deep as a winter river. I am sorry, Marcus said and meant it. Sorry does not bring him back, Gracia replied. Sorry does not free me. Why do you care, human? You could have ignored me. It would have been easier. Yes, Marcus agreed. It would have been. They sat in silence for a moment, the sounds of the camp a distant backdrop. Marcus knew he should return to his cabin, should leave her to whatever fate awaited in the capital. But the weight in his chest had not lifted. If anything, it had grown heavier. What will they do with you? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Sell me, Gracia said flatly. To mines, to fighting pits, to whoever wants an orc to break and use until there is nothing left. I have heard the stories. I will not last long. Marcus clenched his jaw, his hands curling into fists. Have you tried to escape? A harsh laugh escaped her, more pain than humor. Look at me, human. I am chained with iron blessed by their priests. I am weak from days without proper food or water. Even if I could break free, where would I go? I am alone in human lands, and my clan is 3 weeks' journey north. They would run me down before I made it a mile. You could fight, Marcus suggested, knowing even as he said it how hollow it sounded. I could die, Gracia corrected. That is not fighting. That is just choosing how the end comes. Marcus stood abruptly, his decision crystallizing into something solid and undeniable. Wait here. Gracia made a sound that might have been another laugh. Where would I go? He returned to his cabin and retrieved the small lockbox he kept beneath his bed. Inside was the sum of his savings, coins he had set aside from selling his military service pay and the meager profits from his farm. It was meant to see him through the winter, to buy seed for the spring planting, to keep him alive in this self-imposed exile. He counted out the coins, calculating quickly, then scooped the entire amount into a leather pouch. It was every copper and silver he owned, a pathetic sum compared to the wealth men like Cornelius commanded, but it was what he had. He walked back across the yard, this time directly to the merchant camp. The guards looked up as he approached, hands moving to weapon hilts, but Cornelius waved them off and rose from his seat by the fire, his expression curious and calculating. Master Kane, the merchant said warmly, to what do we owe this unexpected visit? I want to buy the orc, Marcus said without preamble. Silence fell over the camp. The guards exchanged glances, and Cornelius's eyebrows rose nearly to his hairline. I beg your pardon, the orc girl, Gracia. I want to buy her from you. Name your price. Cornelius recovered quickly, his merchant instincts taking over. He stroked his beard thoughtfully, his eyes gleaming in the firelight. My dear fellow, I am afraid you misunderstand the value of such merchandise. She is young, strong despite her current condition, and rare. In the capital, she will fetch at least 500 gold crowns, possibly more if the right buyers are present. Marcus felt his heart sink, but he kept his expression neutral. I have 70 silver marks. It is everything I own. The merchant actually laughed, a booming sound that echoed across the camp. 70 silver. Good sir, that would not cover the cost of her chains. I appreciate the offer truly, but it is simply not feasible. Then what would be feasible? Marcus pressed. I have this land, 30 acres. It is not much, but the soil is good. I could deed it to you." Cornelius waved a dismissive hand. "I am a trader, not a farmer. What would I do with land at the edge of nowhere? No, I am afraid we cannot reach an agreement." "Unless," he paused, his expression sharpening, "you have something else of value, a family heirloom perhaps, a deed to property elsewhere." Marcus shook his head slowly. "I have nothing else." "Then we have nothing to discuss," Cornelius said, not unkindly. "I suggest you return to your cabin and sleep well. We will be gone by dawn, and you can forget this unfortunate creature and go about your life." Marcus looked past the merchant to where Gracia sat chained to the post. She was watching him, her expression unreadable in the shadows. He thought about walking away, about the rational choice, the safe choice. He thought about the winters he had survived, the battles he had walked away from, the compromises he had made to keep breathing. And he thought about the fact that sometimes survival was not enough. "Then I offer myself," Marcus said quietly. The camp went silent again. Cornelius stared at him as if he had sprouted a second head. "Excuse me." "Take me in trade for her," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. "I was a soldier, a good one. I can fight, I can work." "Surely a man has more value than an orc girl in whatever markets you sell to." "You are insane," Cornelius said flatly. "Perhaps," Marcus agreed. "But I am serious. Release her, leave her this land and what supplies I have, and I will go with you willingly. No trouble, no resistance. You can sell me to whatever labor gang or fighting pit you choose." Cornelius studied him for a long moment, his merchant's mind clearly working through the angles. "Why?" he asked finally. "Why would you do this? She is nothing to you, an orc, an enemy of your people. This makes no sense." Marcus met his gaze steadily. "Because I have done enough terrible things in my life. Because I am tired of being the kind of man who looks away. Because if I let you take her without trying everything I can, then I might as well have never left the army, never come here seeking something better. Call it penance, call it foolishness, but this is my offer." The merchant shook his head slowly. "You understand I could simply take you both. I have guards, weapons. What stops me from chaining you alongside her and doubling my profit? Honor, I hope," Marcus said. "But if not that, then the knowledge that a man taken by force will find a way to escape or die trying, and neither outcome benefits you. A man who trades himself willingly is a different matter. He will keep his word." Cornelius stroked his beard again, his eyes calculating. Finally, he turned to one of his guards. "Bring me the lockbox from my wagon, the one with the ledgers." The guard hurried off, and Marcus waited, barely breathing. Behind the merchant, he could see Gracia had risen to her knees, her eyes wide and fixed on him with something he could not quite name. The guard returned with a heavy wooden box, which Cornelius opened to reveal papers, quills, and ink. "I will tell you what I will do," the merchant said slowly. "You are right that a skilled soldier has value, perhaps more than a single orc, depending on the buyer. But you have also put me in a difficult position. If I agree to this trade, word will spread, and people will think me soft, willing to negotiate with madmen. This is bad for business." He paused, pulling out a sheet of parchment and beginning to write. "However, I am not without some sense of curiosity. I want to see what happens, so I will offer you a different arrangement." Marcus tensed, suspicion rising. "What arrangement?" "I will sell you the orc for what you offered. 70 silver marks, and your oath that you will never speak of this transaction to anyone. The orc girl goes free to do as she wishes, though I imagine she will not last long alone in human lands. You keep your land and your freedom. And I keep my reputation for being a shrewd businessman who got 70 silver for what amounts to a dying animal." Cornelius looked up from his writing, his eyes hard. "But hear me well, Marcus Kane. If I ever hear that you have spoken of this, If any whisper reaches me that you have told others I can be swayed by sentiment, I will return with enough men to burn your farm to ashes and drag you both to fates worse than any quick death. Do we have an understanding?" Marcus swallowed hard. It was better than he had hoped for, though the merchant's threat was real enough. "We have an understanding. Then fetch your silver and let us conclude this business," Cornelius said, returning to his writing. "I want to be far from here by dawn, before I reconsider this moment of uncharacteristic weakness." Marcus ran back to his cabin, retrieved the pouch of coins, and returned to press it into the merchant's waiting hand. Cornelius counted the coins with practiced speed, nodded once, and gestured to his guards. "Release the orc. Give her to Master Cain and let us strike this camp. We leave within the hour." The guards moved to obey, unlocking the chains that bound Gracia to the post and removing the shackles from her wrists and ankles. She stumbled as she stood, her legs barely able to support her weight after so long in captivity. Marcus moved to catch her, and she leaned against him, her breath coming in short gasps. Cornelius pressed a signed document into Marcus's hand. "A bill of sale. It states that the orc known as Gracia is now your property, legally acquired and transferred. Keep it safe in case anyone questions your possession of her." He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "And remember our agreement, Cain. Silence or suffer the consequences." "I remember," Marcus said. Within an hour, as promised, the merchant caravan had struck their camp and rolled away into the night, leaving Marcus standing in his yard with an exhausted orc girl leaning heavily against his side. The moon hung overhead, indifferent and cold, and for a moment Marcus wondered what exactly he had just done. He had given away everything he owned for a stranger, tied his fate to a member of a species most humans considered monsters, and made an enemy of a man with wealth and connections. Gracia stirred against him, her voice barely a whisper. "You are an idiot, Marcus Cain." Despite everything, Marcus found himself smiling. "Yes," he agreed. "I have been told that before." He helped her inside the cabin, guiding her to the narrow bed in the corner. She collapsed onto it with a groan, her eyes already closing. Marcus fetched water, blankets, and what remained of his food stores. He cleaned the wounds on her wrists and ankles where the shackles had bitten deep, his touch as gentle as he could manage, and she did not protest or pull away. By the time he finished, she was asleep, her breathing deep and steady, her face finally relaxed from the constant tension of captivity. Marcus sat in his single chair and watched her sleep, his mind churning with questions about what would come next. He had not thought beyond the immediate act of freeing her. She was legally his property now according to that bill of sale, but he would never claim ownership over another living being. When she woke, he would tell her she was free to go wherever she wished, though the merchant had been right that an orc alone in human lands would face constant danger. But that was a problem for the morning. For now, he was simply exhausted, the adrenaline of the night's events fading to leave him hollow and drained. He pulled a blanket over himself and let his eyes close, trusting to luck and whatever gods might still listen that he had not just made the worst mistake of his life. Dawn came too quickly, pale light filtering through the gaps in the cabin walls. Marcus woke to the sound of movement and opened his eyes to find Gracia sitting up in the bed, examining her surroundings with cautious curiosity. She looked better than she had the night before. Some color returned to her green skin, though the bruises and cuts remained stark reminders of her ordeal. "Good morning," Marcus said, his voice rough with sleep. Gracia turned to look at him, her expression guarded. "You are still here." "I thought perhaps I dreamed last night." "No dream," Marcus said. He stood, wincing at the stiffness in his back from sleeping in the chair, and moved to the small stove to start a fire. Are you hungry? I can make porridge. It is not much, but it will fill your stomach. Why did you do it? Gracia asked, ignoring his question. Why spend everything you have for me? We are strangers, enemies by the reckoning of our peoples. Marcus fed kindling into the stove, watching the flames catch and grow. I told the merchant, I have done enough terrible things. I wanted to do something good for once. That is not an answer, Gracia pressed. That is an excuse. Good men do not need to buy redemption with grand gestures. What do you really want from me? Marcus turned to face her fully. I want nothing from you. When you are strong enough to travel, you can go wherever you wish. I will not stop you. Until then, you are welcome to stay here and recover. Gracia's eyes narrowed, suspicion clear in every line of her face. You own me now. That paper the merchant gave you says so. I am your property under human law. I do not recognize that law, Marcus said firmly. You are not property. You are a person. The paper is just ink and parchment. Fine words, Gracia said. But words are wind. When I am stronger, when I am no longer useful, will you still say the same? Or will you decide that 70 silver marks should buy you something? Marcus met her gaze steadily. I understand your distrust. If our positions were reversed, I would feel the same. All I can offer is time. Stay, see for yourself what kind of man I am, and then judge. Gracia studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Very well. I will stay until I am strong enough to travel. But know this, Marcus Kane. If you try to claim any rights over me, if you think your purchase entitles you to anything, I will kill you. I may die afterward, but you will die first. Fair enough, Marcus said, and returned to preparing breakfast. The days that followed settled into an uneasy routine. Gracia remained wary, watching Marcus's every move with the alertness of a wild animal ready to bolt or fight. Marcus gave her space, going about his farm work and speaking to her only when necessary. He showed her where things were stored, how to work the well pump, and made it clear she was free to move about as she pleased. Slowly, tentatively, Gracia began to relax. She helped with small tasks around the farm, insisting that she would not be a burden, and Marcus accepted her help without comment. They worked side by side in the garden, pulling weeds and harvesting the few vegetables that had survived his neglect. She was strong, even weakened as she was, and she worked with a focused intensity that spoke of someone unaccustomed to idleness. One evening, about a week after the merchant caravan had departed, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. The silence between them had shifted from hostile to merely cautious, and Marcus found himself more comfortable than he had been in months. Why are you alone out here? Gracia asked suddenly. A human man, young enough and skilled enough to find work anywhere. Why hide at the edge of nowhere? Marcus considered how much to tell her. I was a soldier. I fought in the border wars for 10 years. I saw and did things I am not proud of, things I cannot take back. When the fighting finally ended, I took my service pay and bought this land. I wanted to be somewhere quiet, somewhere I could forget. Forget what? Gracia asked, her voice soft. The things I did to your people, Marcus admitted. The villages we burned, the prisoners we took. I was following orders, but that does not absolve me. I knew it was wrong, and I did it anyway because I was too much a coward to refuse. Gracia was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice held an unexpected gentleness. War makes monsters of everyone. My people have done terrible things to yours as well. We tell ourselves it is justice, revenge for old wrongs, but blood only breeds more blood. You cannot change what you did, Marcus Kane. You can only choose what you do now. And what I did now was spend all my silver on an orc I did not know, Marcus said with a self-deprecating smile. Yes, Gracia agreed. Perhaps you are learning. Another week passed, and Gracia grew stronger. The bruises faded, the cuts healed, and she moved with increasing confidence. She began to contribute more around the farm, her knowledge of plants and animals proving surprisingly useful. She showed Marcus which wild herbs could be eaten and which had medicinal properties. She repaired a section of fence that had been damaged in a storm, her hands deft and sure with rope and wood. They began to talk more, sharing stories of their lives in carefully measured doses. Gracia spoke of her clan in the Stone Mountains, of the harsh beauty of the peaks and valleys, of her brother who had been killed protecting her. Marcus listened and offered what comfort he could, though words seemed inadequate against such grief. In turn, he told her of his childhood on a small farm much like this one, of how he had joined the army seeking glory and found only mud and blood. One afternoon, Marcus was working to repair the roof of his small barn when he heard Gracia cry out. He dropped his tools and ran to find her standing in the garden, a crossbow bolt buried in the ground not 3 feet from where she stood. His eyes scanned the tree line, and he saw them, 3 men on horseback, wearing the colors of a local militia, riding toward the farm with weapons drawn. "Get inside," Marcus said urgently, moving to place himself between Gracia and the approaching riders. "I will not hide," Gracia said, her voice hard. "I am done being hunted." "Then stay behind me," Marcus said. He had no weapons near to hand, having locked away his old sword in a chest and sworn never to touch it again. But his body remembered the stance of a fighter, and he faced the riders with all the authority he could muster. The lead rider, a lean man with a scar across his cheek, reined in his horse just outside the fence. "That is an orc you have there, farmer. We heard reports of orc raiders in the area and looks like we found one." "She is no raider," Marcus said evenly. "She is under my protection." "You have no business here," the scarred man laughed, and his companions joined in. "Your protection? Are you mad? That is a greenskin, a monster. We are doing you a favor by putting it down." "Her name is Gracia," Marcus said, his voice hardening. "She has harmed no one." "You will leave now, or we will have a problem." The scarred man's expression darkened. "You threatening us? There are 3 of us and 1 of you, and you are not even armed. Step aside, or we will assume you are an orc sympathizer and deal with you both." Marcus felt Gracia tense behind him, and he knew she was calculating her chances in a fight. 3 armed men on horseback against 1 unarmed human and a still recovering orc. The math was not favorable. But Marcus had not spent 10 years in the border wars without learning a few things about intimidation and bluffing. "I am Marcus Kane," he said, letting his voice carry. "3rd Company, 2nd Regiment, Northern Border Wars. I have killed more men than you 3 have likely seen in your lives. I am giving you 1 chance to ride away. If you force my hand, I will take you off those horses and show you exactly why they gave me a battlefield commission." The scarred man hesitated, his eyes flickering with uncertainty. The name clearly meant something to him, or at least the confidence with which Marcus spoke it did. But pride and the presence of his companions kept him from backing down immediately. "Big words from an unarmed man," he said, though his voice had lost some of its bravado. Marcus took a step forward, his posture that of a man ready to kill or die, and it was a posture he had worn so many times it felt like a second skin. Last chance. The tension stretched thin as a wire. Then one of the other riders, a younger man with nervous eyes, tugged at the scarred man's sleeve. "Jacob, maybe we should go. If he is who he says he is, the stories I heard about Kane's company, they were not men to cross." The scarred man glared at his companion, but the doubt was there now, eating at his resolve. Finally, he spat on the ground and yanked his horse's reins. "Fine, keep your pet monster. But if there is any trouble, any at all, We will be back with a full company, and neither your name nor your tough talk will save you." They wheeled their horses and rode off, leaving Marcus and Gracia standing in the yard. Marcus did not relax until they were out of sight, and even then his hands were shaking slightly from the adrenaline. He turned to Gracia and found her staring at him with something like awe. "You would have fought them," she said. "3 armed men. You would have died." "Maybe," Marcus admitted. "But I was not going to let them hurt you." Gracia stepped closer, her eyes searching his face. Why risk yourself again for me? You already saved me once. You owe me nothing." Marcus struggled to put into words what he barely understood himself. "You matter, Gracia. Your life matters. Not because of what you can do for me, or because I expect anything in return. You matter because you are alive and you want to stay that way. That should be enough." Something shifted in Gracia's expression, a wall crumbling that she had kept carefully maintained. She reached out and placed a hand on his arm, her touch tentative but deliberate. "I have misjudged you, Marcus Kane. I thought you were like the others, that eventually your true nature would show, but I see now that you are different. Rare." Marcus felt the warmth of her hand through his sleeve and found himself acutely aware of how close she was standing. "I am just trying to be better than I was." "Then you are succeeding," Gracia said softly. That evening, as they ate a simple dinner of stew and bread, the atmosphere between them had changed. The wariness had not entirely disappeared, but it was now tempered with something else, something that felt like the beginnings of trust. They talked late into the night, the conversation flowing more easily than it ever had before. Gracia laughed at a story Marcus told about a training accident in the army, and the sound of her laughter was like discovering water in a desert. Over the following weeks, the farm began to thrive in ways it had not since Marcus first arrived. Working together, they managed to coax life from the stubborn soil. Gracia's knowledge of crop rotation and natural fertilizers complemented Marcus's basic farming skills, and the garden expanded. They repaired the barn, reinforced the fences, and even managed to trade some of their excess vegetables to a traveling peddler for seeds and basic supplies. But more than the physical improvements, something was growing between them that neither wanted to name. Marcus found himself watching Gracia when she worked, admiring the strength in her movements, the way the sunlight caught the green tones of her skin. He noticed the small things, how she hummed old orc songs under her breath when she thought he could not hear, how she always made sure he ate enough even when supplies were tight, how she laughed with her whole body when something truly amused her. Gracia, for her part, had stopped thinking of Marcus as simply the human who had bought her freedom. She saw the kindness in his actions, the way he respected her boundaries without being asked, the quiet strength he carried without needing to prove it to anyone. She saw the sadness he tried to hide, the weight of his past pressing on his shoulders, and she wanted to ease that burden somehow. One night, unable to sleep, Marcus went outside and found Gracia sitting on the porch, staring up at the stars. He sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance, and followed her gaze to the sky. "In my clan," Gracia said quietly, "we believe the stars are the spirits of warriors who died with honor. They watch over us and guide us on the path of righteousness." "It is a beautiful belief," Marcus said. "Do you think my brother is up there?" Gracia asked, her voice thick with emotion. "Do you think he watches me now, sees me living among humans, and judges me for it?" Marcus chose his words carefully. "I think if he loved you, he would want you to be alive and safe. He died protecting you. To honor that sacrifice by surviving, by finding peace, that is not betrayal. That is the whole point." Gracia turned to look at him, tears glinting in her eyes. "I miss him. Every day I miss him." "I know," Marcus said, "and you will miss him for the rest of your life." But the pain will become bearable eventually. You will learn to carry it. Have you? Gracia asked. Learn to carry your pain. Marcus met her gaze, and in that moment he wanted to lie to tell her that he had found peace. But she deserved honesty. I am learning. Having you here helps. Having someone to care for, to protect, it gives me purpose beyond just existing. Gracia reached out and took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. You are a good man, Marcus Kane. Better than most of your kind. Better than most of mine, if I am honest. Marcus squeezed her hand gently. You make me want to be better. They sat like that for a long time, hands clasped under the stars, neither willing to break the moment with words. Something had been acknowledged between them, an attraction that went beyond gratitude or companionship, but neither knew how to take the next step. The gulf between their species seemed vast, filled with centuries of hatred and bloodshed, and the idea of crossing it was terrifying. But the seasons turned, indifferent to human fears. Autumn arrived, painting the trees in shades of red and gold, and Marcus and Gracia worked to prepare for the coming winter. They harvested the last of the crops, smoked meat from a deer Marcus had hunted, and stacked firewood against the side of the cabin. The work was hard but satisfying, and they moved together with the ease of long practice. One evening, as the first real cold snap arrived, they discovered that the single bed in the cabin and the chair would not be adequate for sleeping once the temperature truly dropped. Marcus offered to build a second bed, but Gracia stopped him. That is foolish, she said bluntly. We will both freeze trying to maintain separate spaces. We should share the bed and our warmth. It is practical. Marcus felt heat rise to his face. I do not want you to feel uncomfortable. Gracia's expression softened. Marcus, I trust you. If I did not, I would have left weeks ago. We are adults. We can share a sleeping space without it meaning anything we do not want it to mean. So they shared the bed, lying back to back at first with careful distance between them. But in the deep night, when the cold pressed close and the fire burned low, they gravitated together. Marcus woke one morning to find Gracia curled against his side, her head resting on his shoulder and his arm wrapped around her waist. For a moment, panic flared, but she was still asleep, her breathing deep and even, and she looked peaceful. He carefully extracted himself and started the fire, but the memory of her warmth stayed with him all day. After that, they no longer bothered with the pretense of distance. They slept pressed close, sharing heat and finding comfort in each other's presence. Marcus began to notice other small intimacies creeping into their daily life. A hand on his shoulder when Gracia passed behind him. The way she saved the best portions of food for him. How he found himself looking for excuses to make her smile. Winter deepened, and they were snowed in for days at a time. The small cabin became their entire world, and in that forced proximity, the careful walls they had maintained began to crumble. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. Gracia taught Marcus phrases in the Orcish language, laughing at his clumsy pronunciation. Marcus taught her to read the common script, patiently sounding out words until she could manage simple sentences. One night, as a blizzard howled outside and the cabin creaked under the wind's assault, Gracia asked the question that had been building between them for weeks. What will happen when spring comes, Marcus? He looked up from the piece of wood he had been carving, a simple figurine that was meant to be a bird but looked more like a lump with wings. What do you mean? When the roads clear and travel becomes possible again, Gracia said, staring into the fire. What will I do? Where will I go? I cannot return to my clan. They will have thought me dead by now, moved on with their lives. And I cannot stay here forever as your charity case. Marcus set down his carving. You are not a charity case. This is your home as much as mine now. You have worked as hard as I have to keep this place running. If anything, I should be paying you for your labor." "You do not understand," Gracia said, frustration creeping into her voice. "I need to know what I am to you. Am I a friend, a worker? A burden you took on and now cannot figure out how to shed? I need to know where I stand." Marcus stood and moved to sit beside her, his heart pounding. This was the moment, he realized, where he either spoke the truth or lost her forever to uncertainty. "You are the most important person in my life," he said quietly. "I look forward to waking up because you are here. I work hard because I want to build something with you. I go to sleep grateful because I get to hold you. I do not know what that makes you by formal definition, but that is what you are to me." Gracia turned to face him fully, her eyes wide and searching. "You speak of me as if you care for me in a way that goes beyond friendship." "Yes," Marcus said simply. "I do." "I am an orc," Gracia said, as if he might have forgotten. "My skin is green, I have tusks. I am everything your people are taught to fear and hate. How can you care for me that way?" Marcus reached out and cupped her face with one hand, his thumb brushing along the line of her jaw. "I care for you because you are brave and kind and stronger than anyone I have ever met. I care for you because you laugh at my terrible jokes and you hum when you cook, and you always make sure I eat enough. I care for you because when I am with you, I feel like maybe I am worth something after all. Your skin could be purple or blue or striped like a tiger, and none of it would change how I feel." Gracia's breath caught, and she leaned into his touch. "I have felt this pull between us. I thought I was imagining it, that it was gratitude or loneliness making me see things that were not there. But you feel it too." "Every moment of every day," Marcus admitted. She closed the remaining distance between them and kissed him. It was tentative at first, a question more than a statement, but when Marcus kissed her back, gentle and sure, it deepened into something more. Her tusks were smooth against his lips, and her mouth was warm and tasted faintly of the tea they had shared after dinner. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I care for you too," Gracia whispered against his lips. "I think I have for a while now. I was just too afraid to admit it." "Afraid of what?" Marcus asked. "That you would reject me. That I was foolish for thinking a human could love an orc. That this was all just kindness on your part and I was mistaking it for something more." Marcus kissed her again, slower this time, trying to pour all of his certainty into the gesture. "You are not foolish, and this is not kindness. This is me falling in love with you." Gracia pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "Love, you love me." "Yes," Marcus said, the words simple and undeniable. "I love you, Gracia of the Stone Mountain clan. I love your strength and your courage and your laugh. I love the way you care for things, even after everything you have been through. I love you and I want you to stay, not because you have nowhere else to go, but because this is where you want to be." Tears spilled down Gracia's cheeks, and she let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "You impossible, wonderful fool. Yes, I want to stay. I want to build a life with you." "I love you too, Marcus Kane." They held each other as the storm raged outside, two souls who had found each other against all odds and reason. The world outside might not understand, might condemn them for crossing boundaries that were meant to remain firm, but in that moment, none of it mattered. They had each other, and that was enough. As winter gave way to spring, their relationship deepened and solidified. They were partners in every sense, working the farm together, sharing their lives fully. The physical aspect of their love developed naturally, tenderly, each of them learning the other's body and finding joy in that discovery. Gracia's strength was tempered with surprising gentleness, and Marcus treated her with a reverence that made her feel cherished in ways she had never imagined possible. But the outside world could not be ignored forever. As the roads cleared and travel became possible again, they began to see more people passing by the farm. Some were simply travelers who paid them no mind, but others stared at Gracia with hostility or fear. Marcus made sure to stay close whenever strangers were present, his protective instincts on high alert. The true test came in late spring when a group of soldiers from the territorial garrison arrived at the farm. They were not hostile, but their presence was intimidating. 6 armed men led by a Captain Marcus vaguely recognized from his army days. "Marcus Kane," the captain said, dismounting. "I heard you were living out here, but I did not believe it. You are a long way from the barracks." "Captain Hendricks," Marcus said, nodding respectfully. "I left the service 3 years ago. This is my land now." Hendricks glanced at Gracia, who stood on the porch, her posture tense but not aggressive. "And the orc, Gracia," Marcus corrected. "She is my partner. We work this farm together." Hendricks's expression was carefully neutral. "I have reports of an orc living on this property. Some locals are concerned. They remember the raids, the attacks. Having a greenskin so close to the settlements makes them nervous." "Gracia has harmed no one," Marcus said firmly. "She is here legally." "I have a bill of sale if you need to see it." "A bill of sale," Hendricks repeated, his tone suggesting what he thought of that. "So she is your property then?" "No," Marcus said. "The bill of sale is a legal fiction to keep busybodies from causing trouble. Gracia is free to go wherever she wishes." "She chooses to stay here with me." Hendricks studied them both for a long moment. Then he sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "Look, Kane, I am not here to cause trouble. You are a good soldier, and from what I hear, you are a decent neighbor. You keep to yourself, pay your dues, cause no problems. But I have to respond to complaints. So I am asking you as a courtesy to keep a low profile. Do not give people reasons to come after you with torches and pitchforks." "We have kept to ourselves," Marcus said. "But if people come onto my land looking for trouble, I will defend what is mine." "I would expect nothing less," Hendricks said. He turned to his men. "Mount up. We are done here." Before leaving, he looked back at Marcus. "For what it is worth, Kane, I think you have done something either very brave or very stupid. Time will tell which, but I hope it works out for you." After the soldiers left, Gracia came down from the porch and stood beside Marcus. "That could have gone worse." "Yes," Marcus agreed. "But it could have gone better too. We need to be careful. People are watching us now." "Then they will see 2 people living quietly and harming no one," Gracia said. "We cannot control what others think or feel, Marcus. We can only control our own actions. When did you become so wise?" Marcus asked with a slight smile. "I have always been wise," Gracia said. "You are just now noticing." Despite the tension with the outside world, life on the farm continued to improve. The spring planting was successful and they expanded their crops. Marcus taught Gracia to ride the old horse they had acquired in a trade, and she took to it with natural grace. They even began to make cautious friendships with a few of the more open-minded neighbors, people who judged them by their actions rather than their species. One such neighbor was an elderly woman named Margaret Foster, who lived on an adjacent property. She had watched Marcus and Gracia working together over the months and had eventually invited them to dinner. It was an awkward affair at first, with Margaret clearly unsure how to interact with an orc, but Gracia's natural dignity and Marcus's easy manner smoothed over the rough spots. By the end of the evening, Margaret was laughing at Gracia's stories and insisting they come back soon. "You are good for that boy," Margaret told Gracia as they helped clean up after dinner. "He was half dead when he first came here, haunted by something, but I see life in him now, purpose. That is because of you." Gracia felt warmth spread through her chest at the words. "He saved my life. I owe him everything." "Nonsense," Margaret said briskly. You do not stay with someone out of debt, you stay because you want to, and it is clear you two want to be together. That is all that matters. It was the first time someone from the human community had acknowledged their relationship without condemnation, and Gracia found herself blinking back tears. "Thank you," she managed. Margaret patted her hand. "Love is too rare and precious to waste time judging it. You be happy, dear." Both of you. Summer arrived in full force, hot and bright. The crops grew tall and strong, and Marcus and Gracia worked from dawn to dusk to keep up with the demands of the farm. They hired a local boy to help with the harvest, paying him fair wages, and he proved eager and hardworking despite his initial nervousness around Gracia. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set, Marcus turned to Gracia with a serious expression. "I have been thinking about something." "That sounds ominous," Gracia said, but her tone was light. "I want to make us official," Marcus said. "I want to marry you if you will have me." Gracia's eyes went wide. "Marry? You mean a human marriage ceremony?" "Or an orc one, if you prefer," Marcus said quickly. "I do not care about the details. I just want the world to know that you are my wife, that we have chosen each other for life." Gracia was quiet for a moment, her mind racing. Marriage was a significant concept in orc culture, a binding of souls and families. But she had no family left, no clan to perform the traditional rites. And yet, the idea of being Marcus's wife, of having that formal recognition of their bond, filled her with a fierce joy. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and sure. "Yes, I will marry you, Marcus Kane." Marcus let out a breath he had not realized he was holding and pulled her into a tight embrace. "Thank you. You have made me the happiest man alive." "We should do both," Gracia said, pulling back to look at him. "A human ceremony for your people and an orc ritual for mine. We honor both our heritages." "I think that is perfect," Marcus agreed. They planned the wedding for the autumn, wanting to wait until after the harvest was complete. Word spread through the community and reactions were mixed. Some were outraged, seeing it as an abomination. Others were merely curious or indifferent. But a surprising number were supportive, including Margaret Foster, who immediately began organizing the event and recruiting other open-minded neighbors to help. The ceremony itself was held on the farm, in the field where they had worked side by side for so many months. Margaret had enlisted a traveling priest who was willing to perform the human ceremony, and Gracia had researched the traditional orc marriage rites, adapting them for their situation. About 30 people attended, a mix of neighbors, a few of Marcus's old army friends, and even the peddler who regularly traded with them. There were no representatives from Gracia's clan, but she carried a small token that had belonged to her brother, incorporating him into the ceremony in spirit. The priest spoke of love that transcended boundaries, of courage and commitment. Marcus and Gracia exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising to honor and protect each other, to build a life together regardless of what challenges the world threw at them. Then, in a quieter moment with only their closest friends present, they performed the orc ritual, exchanging weapons as symbols of trust and painting each other's hands with mixed blood to represent the binding of their lives. When it was over and they were declared married by both human and orc tradition, Marcus kissed his wife under the golden light of autumn, and the small crowd cheered. It was not a large wedding or a grand affair, but it was real and meaningful, and that was all that mattered. The feast afterward was simple but joyful. Margaret had made a cake, others brought dishes to share, and someone produced a fiddle and played cheerful tunes while people danced in the yard. Gracia laughed more than Marcus had ever seen, her happiness radiant and infectious. For a few hours, the weight of being different, of being judged, lifted entirely, and they were simply two people celebrating their love with friends. As the evening wore down and the guests began to depart, Margaret pulled Marcus aside. "You have done something remarkable here, young man. You have shown people that the walls we build between us are choices, not inevitabilities. I am proud to call you my neighbor." "Thank you, Margaret," Marcus said sincerely, "for everything. We could not have done this without you." "Nonsense," Margaret said, waving a hand. "You did the hard part. I just baked a cake." That night, alone in their cabin, Marcus and Gracia lay together as husband and wife. The title felt both strange and perfectly natural, a formal recognition of what had been true in their hearts for months. "Are you happy?" Marcus asked, brushing a strand of dark hair from Gracia's face. "More than I ever thought possible," Gracia said. "When I was chained to that post, waiting to be sold, I thought my life was over. I thought I would die in some dark mine or fighting pit, forgotten and alone. But you gave me a future. You gave me hope. And now I have you and this life we have built, and it is more than I ever dreamed." "You gave me purpose," Marcus said. "You made me believe I could be more than the sum of my failures. I was just existing before you came. Now I am living." They held each other close, listening to the familiar sounds of the farm, the wind in the trees, the distant call of an owl. Outside, the world continued on, indifferent to their joy, but in that moment they had everything they needed. The years that followed were not without challenges. There were incidents, times when travelers or locals caused trouble, forcing Marcus and Gracia to defend their home and their right to live as they chose. But each challenge they faced together, their bond growing stronger with every trial. They expanded the farm, eventually hiring more help and becoming a successful operation. They became known in the region, not as oddities, but as honest, hardworking people who treated everyone fairly. Marcus and Gracia also became advocates for others in mixed-species relationships, quietly supporting those who faced persecution and offering their farm as a safe haven when needed. They could not change the world overnight, but they could change their small corner of it, one act of kindness at a time. 5 years after their wedding, on a cool autumn evening much like the one where they had married, Gracia told Marcus she was pregnant. He was stunned into silence, then let out a whoop of joy that echoed across the farm. They held each other and cried happy tears, marveling at the miracle of creating life together despite all the odds. Their daughter was born in the spring, a beautiful child with her mother's green skin and pointed ears, but her father's eyes and facial structure. They named her Alina, after Marcus's mother, and she was the center of their world from her first breath. Raising her brought new challenges, preparing her for a world that might not accept her, but Marcus and Gracia faced those challenges as they had faced everything, together, with love and determination. Alina grew up strong and confident, secure in the love of her parents and the community they had built around them. She learned both human and orcish traditions, spoke both languages fluently, and carried herself with the pride of someone who knew exactly who she was. She was a living symbol of what was possible when people chose love over fear. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Marcus and Gracia stood on the same spot where they had married, watching Alina play in the field. The farm had grown, the cabin expanded, and the land prospered. But more importantly, they had built a family, a true home in every sense of the word. "You ever regret it?" Gracia asked, leaning against Marcus. "Spending all your silver on me, tying your life to mine." Marcus wrapped his arms around his wife and rested his chin on the top of her head. "Not for a single moment. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. That night when the merchant offered to sell you, I thought I was just trying to do one good thing to balance out all the bad. But the truth is, you saved me just as much as I saved you. Maybe more." "We saved each other," Gracia said, turning to kiss him. And we built something beautiful. They stood together as the sun set, casting long shadows across the land they had claimed and nurtured. In the distance, they could hear Alina's laughter as she chased a butterfly through the tall grass. It was a simple moment, unremarkable to anyone else, but to Marcus and Gracia it was everything. It was the life they had fought for, the future they had chosen against all odds. The merchant who had sold Gracia to Marcus all those years ago had thought he was making a shrewd business deal, getting 70 silver for what he considered a dying animal. He had no idea he was actually facilitating something far more valuable. A love story that would span decades, change a community, and prove that the boundaries people drew between themselves were never as solid as they believed. Marcus Kane had been offered a chest of gold for an orc girl, and he had said no. He had paid his last 70 silver instead, spent everything he had, and in doing so, had gained something priceless. He had found love, purpose, and a family. He had found Gracia, and she had found him. And together they had built a life that was worth more than all the gold in the world. As night fell, and the first stars appeared, Marcus and Gracia called Alina inside for dinner. They walked together to their cabin, hand in hand, their daughter running ahead with the boundless energy of childhood. The door closed behind them, warm light spilling from the windows, and inside they shared a meal and stories and laughter, a family complete and content. The world outside might never fully accept them, might always see them as unusual or wrong, but they had learned that the opinions of others mattered far less than the life they chose to live. They had each other, they had their daughter, they had their home, and that was more than enough. That was everything. In the years to come, they would face more challenges, would weather storms both literal and figurative. But they would face them together, as they had always done, with love as their foundation and hope as their guide. The orc girl who had once been chained and sold like property had become a wife, a mother, a farmer, a pillar of her community. The human soldier who had tried to escape his past had become a husband, a father, a man who had finally found peace. And it had all started because Marcus Kane, when offered a chest of gold for her, had said the only words that mattered. "The orc girl stays with me." Those words had changed everything, had set in motion a chain of events that proved love could bridge any divide, could overcome any prejudice. They were words that Gracia whispered to herself sometimes, in quiet moments, marveling at how a single choice, a single act of compassion, had transformed her entire existence. Marcus would sometimes think back to that night, to the moment he had walked away from the merchant caravan with an exhausted orc girl leaning on his shoulder, and wonder what would have happened if he had made a different choice. If he had simply provided water as requested and let the caravan leave without intervening. He would have kept his silver, maintained his solitude, continued his slow decay into bitterness and regret. But he would never have known Gracia, never have loved her, married her, raised a child with her. Never have learned that redemption was not something you achieved through grand gestures or self-imposed suffering, but through the daily choice to be kind, to care, to love. His life would have been emptier in ways he could not even fully articulate, missing a piece he had not known he needed until it was there. On particularly clear nights, when the work was done and Alina was asleep, Marcus and Gracia would sit on their porch and look up at the stars. Gracia would point out the constellation she believed held her brother's spirit, and Marcus would hold her close, offering the comfort of his presence. They would talk about their plans for the next season, about Alina's education, about the small joys and frustrations of daily life. And sometimes they would simply sit in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes when two people know each other, so completely that words become unnecessary. They would watch the stars wheel overhead, marking the passage of time, and feel grateful for every moment they had together. Their story became something of a legend in the region, told and retold with varying degrees of accuracy. Some versions painted Marcus as a hero, others as a fool. Some portrayed Gracia as a damsel in need of rescue, others as a fierce warrior who had chosen love over vengeance. The truth, as is often the case, was more nuanced and human than any legend could capture, but the core of it remained. A man had been offered a fortune for a captive orc, and he had refused. He had instead spent everything he had to free her, and in doing so had freed himself from the chains of his past. And she, given the choice to leave or stay, had chosen to stay to build a life with him, to love him despite every reason she had to hate his kind. It was a simple story, really. Two broken people finding each other in a world that told them they should be enemies. Two hearts recognizing in each other something precious and worth protecting. Two lives intertwining to create something new and beautiful and wholly their own. As the years stretched on and they grew older together, their love only deepened. The passion of their early days matured into something steadier but no less powerful, the kind of love that comes from truly knowing another person and choosing them every day, over and over again. They weathered losses, celebrated victories, and faced the inevitable challenges that life brings to all who live long enough. Elena grew and eventually left to make her own way in the world, though she visited often and wrote regular letters. She found love herself, with a young man who saw her for who she was rather than what she represented, and gave Marcus and Gracia grandchildren who played in the same fields where their mother had grown up. The farm became a gathering place for those who did not fit neatly into the categories society had created. Mixed couples, outcasts, refugees, all found welcome at the Kane homestead. Marcus and Gracia never turned anyone away who came seeking help, remembering their own desperate beginnings. And through it all, they remained devoted to each other. Marcus would bring Gracia flowers from the field, and she would cook his favorite meals. They would dance in the kitchen to no music but the rhythm of their own hearts. They would argue about the best way to fix a fence or plant a garden, then laugh at their own stubbornness. They would hold each other through nightmares and celebrations, through sickness and health, through every season the world brought their way. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Marcus took Gracia back to the spot where he had first seen her, chained to that post in the merchant's camp. The land looked different now, cultivated and cared for, but the memory remained vivid. "I stood here," Marcus said, pointing, "and I saw you over there and something in my chest just broke. I could not walk away. Even knowing it was foolish, even knowing it would cost me everything, I could not let them take you." Gracia squeezed his hand. "And I stood there, more dead than alive, and I saw you bringing me water, risking the merchant's anger for a stranger. I thought you were mad. I thought surely this kindness was a trick, a way to make me compliant. But you kept being kind day after day, until I had no choice but to believe it was real." "Best 70 silver I ever spent," Marcus said with a grin. "Best 70 silver I was ever worth," Gracia replied, returning his smile. They stood together in the fading light, two people who had built a life from nothing, who had taken the broken pieces of their pasts and forged them into something whole and good. The world had tried to keep them apart, had put every obstacle imaginable in their path, but they had persevered through sheer stubborn determination and love. As full darkness fell and the stars emerged, brilliant and countless, Marcus and Gracia walked hand in hand back to their home. Smoke curled from the chimney, warm light glowed in the windows, and inside waited the life they had created together. A good life, A full life, a life worth every sacrifice and struggle. The orc girl who had once been chained and sold was now a free woman, a beloved wife, a proud mother and grandmother, a respected member of her community. And the man who had saved her had found his own salvation in the process, had become the person he always wanted to be but never thought he could. They had proven that love, real love, knows no boundaries, that compassion and courage can change the world, one person at a time, that the choices we make in moments of crisis define who we are more than any words or beliefs. Marcus Kane had been offered a chest of gold for Gracia, and he had said no. That single decision, made in a heartbeat on a desperate night, had rippled outward in ways he could never have imagined. It had changed laws, influenced attitudes, inspired others to follow their hearts rather than society's dictates. But more than any of that, it had given two people who had every reason to be enemies a chance to become everything to each other. And in the end, that was the only thing that truly mattered. Not the gold he refused, not the acclaim or condemnation that followed, not even the changes they helped bring about in their world. What mattered was that they had found each other, chosen each other, and loved each other with everything they had. The orc girl stayed with him, and he stayed with her, and together they built something that would outlast them both. A legacy of love, acceptance, and hope that would echo through the generations to come. A testament to what is possible when people have the courage to see past the surface and recognize the common humanity, the shared soul, that binds all living beings together. And that, truly, was worth more than any chest of gold could ever be.